What's going on, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. We're talking Finland today, UMK. It's one of the selections that gets lots of people very excited, and it's one that clearly values quality over quantity. Just 7 songs, just one night, no messing around. So let's talk about which ones are looking like winners in the lead up to the big show. There's a lot to admire about how Finland does their selection, and it's one that I hope other broadcasters look towards as an example of high quality production. Over the course of about a week and a half, they release 1 song per day, and each song has an accompanying lyric video, which is effectively a music video given how elaborate they are. Because it's only 7 songs, each one is given enough time and attention so that they're presented in the best way possible, which is not something that you could do with the 40 song selection that we saw in Malta, for example. Also, from a quality point of view, the selection feels more or less evenly matched. Like, when you consider the merits of each individual song, they, for the most part, feel suitable for Eurovision. And this year I would say all but one, but we'll get to that. Now, despite it feeling like an even playing field, in any selection there's always 1 or 2 or 3 favorites that emerge. So let's get to our first song, and we'll begin with the one that has been the biggest phenomenon since it was released. The popularity of Cha 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 cannot be overstated. It is one of the most talked about songs in all of the national selection season. It's been a huge success in Finland. It's also been very successful on streaming platforms, and in every poll that I was able to find, it finished on top, often by a landslide. I think the most accurate description of the music here is organized chaos, maybe, because it's tackling several genres at once, like metal, hip-hop, and EDM, but in a way that feels strangely balanced. And how it evolves, I think, helps with that balance as well. It starts off in a little bit more of a straightforward way, being a bit shoutier, quite aggressive, but then you get this change up midway through where it becomes more melodic. And to top it off, what the song is actually about is, I think, just precious. A song like this, you would be forgiven for thinking that this guy was really angry about something. But really, what he's singing about is, after having a long week, he wants to go to the bar, have a few pina coladas, and just go to the dance floor and forget his troubles. Typically, a song that's so in your face and aggressive would be thought of as one that could only be appreciated by like a rock or metal audience. But one recurring comment that I've been seeing is, this is not my type of music, and yet I love it. And that's exactly how I felt, to be honest. And I think the fact that it's resonating so much with so many different people really speaks to how unique this entry is. Now, for some people, they might just look at this as like typical Eurovision craziness, and I suppose there's not too much you can do about that, but I really think that there's a lot more to it. I think that it's the kind of entry that balances humor with storytelling, and it's just f***ing addictive, you know? Really, the one missing piece is the live performance, which is really something that applies to every entry here. We've seen Käärijä perform this in smaller venues that gets everybody singing along and shouting, and really what we need is that energy being brought to a television stage. As long as it lives up to all the excitement that it's caused up to now, then I think this would be a really great choice, and possibly Finland's most competitive entry ever. So I want to see this go. Benjamin's song is also one that's proven to be pretty popular, especially with international fans. And I think that if it wasn't for the fact that Käärijä was in this selection, this would have been the clear fan favorite. I mean, it has that Eurofan appeal all over it. It's up-tempo, it's 80s synth pop, and it's very, very gay. My friend Dominic from Eurovox, who would often review the Finnish songs with me in years prior, he once coined the term Eurobait, and I don't think there's a more perfect description for a song like this. Interestingly though, Benjamin has pointed out that there aren't any gendered pronouns in this song. People just know that he's singing about a guy because, well, so generally speaking, I've grown tired of these entries that lean so heavily into 80s aesthetics, but I know that there's still a demand for them, so I've kind of grown to accept that they're inevitable. With that said, I don't want to undermine the song either, because I think it is actually a really good one, despite the overindulgence of 80s sounds. And I think that it has a hook that is really addictive. It's one that I often find myself singing, and it's the kind of earworm that I won't get tired of. So if this did happen to win and be the entry for Finland, I would be pretty happy, but there is one reservation that I have based on UMKs that we've seen in the past. So when it comes to staging these songs that have queer themes or are meant to be kind of silly and lighthearted, they really go all out on the camp, like cranking it up all the way to 15. On the one hand, it's admirable that they're not afraid to be in your face about it, but on the other hand, I think that you do eventually reach a point where it gets a bit excessive and you start to alienate people. And I don't just mean non-LGBTQ people. I think that when you have something that seems to be indulging a little bit too much in these camp qualities, even queer folks can be a bit put off by it because it might even seem like they're being pandered to, or it's just, excessive, unnecessarily excessive. So as long as they're able to navigate that and, find that balance, make sure that they're still presenting it as a song and not just this like wacky performance, then I think this would be great and I would really welcome it at Eurovision. Now, if there was a style or an approach to Eurovision songs that we could consider anti-Eurobait, it would be one like Robins, where it's an up-tempo dance song, usually with a disco funk sound to it, and often fronted by a straight male performer, and it's also presented in a way where the visuals are really slick, and the lead singer is meant to look really cool, is leaning into their good looks, and, is showing a bit of swagger. Usually the country that is considered to be the most guilty of sending these acts is Sweden, but people conveniently leave out other countries that have also done this as well, looking at you, Israel, and Switzerland. Now, it's not as if these entries do poorly at Eurovision. It's actually the fact that they do well that seems to make these really diehard fans roll their eyes whenever a similar looking one comes along. So getting beyond the inherent skepticism, I think that a lot of what I said about Benjamin's song also applies to Robins. Both of them have their share of musical tropes that have been in fashion for a little bit too long to be considered original. But underneath that, you still have a catchy melody, clean production, and a song that flows pretty nicely from start to finish. If this song were to come on in a club, it would get people moving and possibly even singing along with the woo part. Like, there's a lot to appreciate here. Now, I think an additional factor that has made this entry a bit villainized is the fact that Robin is a pretty popular artist in Finland, and UMK's voting system is 75% televote, 25% jury. So because of this, theoretically, an artist could rise to the top of the scoreboard if their fan base is large enough and dedicated enough. And a jury wouldn't be able to counterbalance that quite as effectively as if it were a 50-50 system. So I don't know, if that were to happen here, I wouldn't mind that much. I actually quite enjoy the song, even if it's a bit familiar. Of course, it wouldn't be my first choice, and I think that the biggest flaw that can be said about this song is that it's just a bit too ordinary when compared to some of the other ones that we see. But if it were to go to Eurovision, I think it could do decently so long as it's presented in a way that's inviting rather than flashy and just made to look cool. Like, to bring a party atmosphere that people want to be part of.
Till I have something to lose.
So I'm a big fan of the ballads that we've seen from Finland at Eurovision, and the ones that have been appearing at UMK in the last few years have had the exact approach that I really appreciate. They feel modern and unconventional, and it's not as if when you're listening to it for the first time you're thinking, oh yeah, this sounds like one from a few years ago. They are very much their own thing. There's two things that jump out at me about Alexandra's song. The first is instrumentation, which is mostly built around the piano, but underneath that you have these electronic synths and drum pads. They're played at quite a fast tempo, which is a big contrast to the slowness of Alexandra's voice and the piano. But because it's so subtle, it actually works really well and adds a lot of depth rather than clashing with the rest of it. The second thing is lyrics, which in addition to having like a really natural flow and just feeling a bit effortless, they also just talk about things that I think are pretty relatable. The idea of feeling on the outside of things because you're lacking these deep and meaningful relationships. I think it's something that a lot of people could relate to. Because a lot of the attention has been occupied by some other songs, I do think that this one seems to be that it's on the path to being overlooked, but it's a very high quality song and one that's deserving of a good score, I would say. And based on some of the things that Alexandra has said about the live performance, I think that this could be giving me just as much visually as it's giving me musically. So I really want to see this do well. Kuma are bringing quite a unique song to this selection, not just when considering what we have at UMK, but also when we think about what we've seen already at Eurovision, because I don't think that there's been a song that resembles this kind of sound. Additionally, I would say that this one also succeeds at sounding atmospheric more than the others do. Alexander's is a close second, I would say, but this one does it in a very different way, and I think it's the most appealing aspect of the song overall. The band also comes into this selection as one of the most commercially successful, with certain gold and platinum certifications on their singles, and that success is also extended to this song because it's the only one that seems to compete with Cha 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 in terms of total streams, and it's also been #1 on the official Finnish charts. So they're certainly in a good position to benefit from some of the hype and the recognition that they already have, and that could translate into a good score, possibly even getting them the win. But one weakness is that I find this song to be a bit less memorable than some of the other ones, and after we heard all 7, this one was the one that I struggled the most with to kind of reproduce in my head for the general sound of it. And so for that reason, I wonder if casual viewers will flock to this song enough for it to secure a win, especially when compared to some of these perceived heavyweights. But because the atmosphere in this song is so strong, if it has equally atmospheric staging, then I think this could really work and be a good choice. And even when we're considering the fact that in this first semi-final at Eurovision, there are already so many bands that have been chosen, I don't think that this one would be confused with some of the other ones, and it could very well find a spot in the final comfortably.
Hey, just work your body, yeah. Bring out your Cardi, show them that they got no business on the dance floor.
Kira has come with a confident dance pop number that we expect to see at these kinds of selections, and people certainly still come to Eurovision expecting to hear them. Now, if this were another country's selection, I think that this song would have been a clear favorite because it's got that Eurofan appeal, it's catchy and easy on the ears, but it's also not too by the book to be considered unoriginal, and I think that certain details like the flute solos give it that little extra charm. But because we're talking about Finland here, I think that this song might have been a bit forgotten about, which isn't to say that it doesn't have any love or appreciation, but because this was the first song to be released, it does seem like it's being forgotten about because those other songs came up and just kind of took up all the oxygen in the room. Now, Kira happens to be a brand new artist. This is her first single, and I think up to now she's really only been known for being on The Voice. And with these new artists, there's often a question about how well they'll handle the demands of a Eurovision level performance, especially one that will require you to be singing while pulling off some choreography. So perhaps being off the radar in this case is actually a good thing, so that the pressure is off a little bit and you don't have to worry about appeasing people, appeasing the hype that's around your song, and just focus on putting on the best performance possible. So as much as it isn't like a personal favorite and it doesn't seem to be that likely that it would win, I'm all for seeing this succeed in whatever way it can, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she'll bring.
Mut meidän massan nöyrinä kuljetaan, eikä paljon puhellakaan, tiedät Kimi Räikkösen, se voitti Formula 1.
We're closing things off with Portion Boys, who might have been the act that had the most hype going into the competition, which would justify why this was the last song that was released. Looking at their back catalog, you very quickly get an idea of the kind of music that they make. It's silly party music that's aiming to be humorous and I guess succeeding more often than not, which would owe to their popularity. But with this song, I've seen a lot of Finns say that they find it embarrassing, and looking at the lyrics, I can see why. The idea behind the song is that people don't seem to know a lot about Finland or Finnish culture, especially when compared to other European countries, and then they list off those other countries and the things that they're known for, like they drink a lot of tea in Britain, and they eat a lot of pasta in Italy, and Mozart is from Austria, and Iceland has hot springs, and the Netherlands has windmills. Okay, so there might be something that's getting lost in translation, I accept that, but from my point of view, a laundry list of the first stereotype that you can think of is inherently not funny. Instead of saying anything clever, you just end up with like a Mumbo number 5 of low-hanging fruit. To add to that, the music is clearly secondary to everything else. It's purposefully cheesy, but because the humor is not coming through, it just feels obnoxious and reminds me exactly of the kind of entries that we used to see at Eurovision 20 years ago. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for a humorous entry, but not if the joke is the main focus over the actual quality of the song. It can't just be over the top for the sake of it. So of all the UMK songs this year, from my point of view, this is the only one that's a definite no. Do not send this song. This is a dated idea of what Eurovision is, and we've seen what happens to these songs that come in thinking that they're gonna milk a joke for 3 minutes, but don't have a good song to back it up.
0 points.
So with all of the songs discussed, we of course have to choose one that we want to see win. And if you've seen my review videos in the past, you'll know that I usually try and take as many factors into consideration, especially hype and fan bias. But in this case, I'm with the rest of you on that cha-cha-cha hype train. I want to see this go to Eurovision, and I think that of all the songs that we see at UMK, this is the one that can take Finland the furthest, even possibly win the contest. But I want to stress possibly because it's still far too early to say. Going off of the songs themselves, this isn't the only good choice. I think there are plenty of good choices here. When we see the live performances, of course, we'll get a better idea of which ones are ready to go and which ones need a bit of work. So if it's not Käärijä who wins in the end, my alternate choice would be Alexandra. Again, it doesn't seem to be that likely that it would be her, but when considering all the Eurovision songs that we have so far, I think that hers would probably shine the most because there's nothing that you could really compare it to. But that's just what I think. Let me know in the comments what you think, who you want to see represent Finland at the Eurovision Song Contest 2023, especially if it's not this big fan favorite. I want to hear compelling reasons for why it should be someone else. And if you haven't done so already, I would love if you subscribe to the channel so that we can keep talking about Eurovision this year. It's definitely shaping up, and I want to know what you have to say about how the contest looks so far. I hope to see you on the next video, and until then, take care.